India has recently started developing an island. Because of this, some say this could put China in a chokehold. With just a single island, they've created a position from which it can block sea routes into China. Today, let's take a closer look at this topic. Let's take a look. India is now actively pushing forward with a large-scale development project on Great Nicobar Island, which is located near the Malacca Strait. The Indian government plans to invest about 15 trillion won in this island to make it a major defense outpost and logistics hub in the Indian Ocean. It is known that the project includes the construction of various infrastructure on the island, such as a container port, power facilities, road networks, and residential facilities. The Indian government seeks to boost national security and expand its influence in the Indian Ocean, though the project faces significant domestic controversy. Opposition politicians, civic groups, and environmental activists say developing Nicobar Island could cause major environmental harm. The area is known for its dense tropical rainforests and diverse ecosystems, and there are concerns that large-scale construction could cause irreversible damage to the natural environment. Some groups also point out that it could affect the living environment of indigenous communities. On the other hand, the ruling party is strongly pushing back against this criticism. The party maintains that since this project is tied to national security and strategic interests, development can no longer be delayed. In particular, they argue that as China continues to expand its influence in the Indian Ocean region, India also needs to secure a strategic base to respond to this. Some ruling party members criticize the opposition's objections, saying they hurt the nation's strategy and even claiming they're based on a pro-China view. India is now actively developing Great Nicobar Island because of the recent impact of the Middle East war. At that time, extreme tensions in the Hormuz region caused a major shock to the global energy market. Asian countries faced direct hits to their oil and natural gas supply, and raw material supply disruptions increased the burden on industries. India, observing this situation, once again realized how much dependence on specific maritime routes can impact national security and the economy. In this process, the place India focused on was the Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca is a main route linking the Indian and Pacific Oceans and is the busiest passage for resources and goods from the Middle East and Africa to Northeast Asia. Due to its short, efficient route, major Asian countries like Korea, China, Japan, and Taiwan focus their trade and energy transport there. In fact, it is known that about 20% to 40% of the world's maritime cargo passes through these waters, and about 35% of the crude oil transported by sea also goes through here. Countless ships that drive the world economy use these waters every day. A military conflict, blockade, or major accident in this area could disrupt the entire international logistics network. South Korea is also a country that is highly dependent on the Strait of Malacca. About 90% of the crude oil imported into the country passes through these waters, and about 30% of the total export cargo volume also uses this route. The safety and stability of the Strait of Malacca directly impact Korea's economy and industry. India has stated that given this geopolitical reality, it must expand its influence near the Strait of Malacca. If India develops Great Nicobar Island near the strait's western entrance as a strategic base, it can better monitor main maritime routes from India to Southeast Asia. India may also gain the ability to closely monitor maritime logistics and energy transport as the international situation changes. The main consensus is that India started developing Nicobar Island primarily because of China. This area is important to many countries, but it's especially crucial for China. Even a slight disruption in operations here could deal a serious blow to China. Right now, China relies on the Strait of Malacca for 80% of its imported energy and 1/3 of its total trade volume. Even just controlling Chinese ships around the Nicobar Islands would cause China enormous economic damage, so why is India being so proactive in trying to keep China in check? India has closely monitored China's movements in recent years. China has been conducting ongoing research on sea conditions, currents, and underwater topography in the Indian Ocean. Although China claims these are scientific and marine surveys, India sees them differently. Ocean data supports future military and submarine operations and boosts maritime surveillance. Additionally, China has steadily increased port investments in Indian Ocean countries. China's first overseas military base in Djibouti, East Africa, is the most notable example. This base gives China a military presence near a key route between the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea. Since then, China has continued to invest large amounts of capital in strategically important port development projects, such as Gwadar in Pakistan, Hambantota Port in Sri Lanka, and Kaokpyu Port in Myanmar. In addition, China is expanding its influence in the region by participating in the development of the Ream Naval Base in Cambodia, which is close to the Indian Ocean. From India's perspective, this trend is not something that can be taken lightly. China is expanding access to key ports and maritime hubs under the banner of economic cooperation. Since the Indian Ocean is vital for India's energy imports and trade, China's growing presence increases India's strategic burden. For this reason, it seems that India has decided it cannot just stand by and watch as China's influence expands. If China is expanding its presence in the Indian Ocean, India also needs new strategic assets to respond by leveraging its advantageous location. India selected the Nicobar Islands development project. India aims to boost its influence near key maritime routes between the Indian Ocean and Southeast Asia through the Nicobar Islands and to build the capacity for closer monitoring of China's activities. For these reasons, the development of the Nicobar Islands is considered by India to be more than just a large-scale regional development project. It is evaluated as a project of significant importance in the long-term strategic competition with China. Of course, China has not been unaware of these risks. China has also long recognized that excessive dependence on the Strait of Malacca could pose a serious threat to its national security. The Chinese leadership has considered the so-called Malacca dilemma a key strategic issue for decades. This is because if passage through the Strait of Malacca is restricted due to war or international conflict, the entire Chinese economy could suffer a major shock. China has heavily invested in land and sea transport networks to bypass the Strait of Malacca, with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor being the most notable project. China has heavily invested in developing Gwadar in southern Pakistan and is building roads, railways, and energy infrastructure linking the port to western China. China aims to create a route to move crude oil and goods from the Middle East to inland China without using the Strait of Malacca. The construction of an energy transportation network through Myanmar is also being pursued in the same context. China has built and is operating oil and gas pipelines that connect the western coast of Myanmar to Yunnan province in China. This enables crude oil and natural gas from the Middle East and Africa to be delivered directly to southwestern China via Myanmar, offering a key alternative to the Strait of Malacca route. Expansion of energy pipeline projects linked to Central Asian countries continues. China is reducing reliance on maritime transport by building land-based energy networks linked to resource-rich countries like Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. By using land pipelines, China can be relatively less affected by international sea lanes. All of these projects are also connected to China's Belt and Road Initiative. China is expanding its supply chains by creating a large transport and logistics network linking Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. The aim is to lessen reliance on certain maritime routes and ensure stable access to resources and goods during crises. However, despite these efforts, the importance of the Malacca Strait has not significantly diminished. This is because a large portion of China's energy imports and trade activities still pass through this strait. Therefore, new factors like Nicobar Islands development are issues China must closely watch. So what could happen next? Experts predict competition between India and China over the Indian Ocean will likely intensify. If the development of Nicobar Island proceeds in earnest, India will secure an even stronger presence near the Strait of Malacca. This is by no means a welcome situation for China. This is because China is also likely to actively utilize its existing bases in the Indian Ocean to expand its influence. China already has a strong navy and is heavily investing in expanding its carrier strike groups and building a blue water navy. In the future, it is likely that the activities of Chinese naval vessels, intelligence-gathering ships, and submarines in the Indian Ocean will increase even further. India is expected to boost its naval power and speed up military infrastructure expansion around the Nicobar Islands. In addition, it is highly likely that the two countries will continue to compete not only in military strength but also in the fields of diplomacy and economy. China aims to maintain its influence by increasing investment and economic cooperation with neighbors, while India plans to counter China by boosting ties with Southeast Asian countries. Countries around the Indian Ocean will likely become more important as competition between the two countries intensifies. Many analysts think this competition is unlikely to lead directly to military conflict, as China and India are nuclear powers with major roles in the global economy. Both countries are well aware of the costs that a full-scale conflict would bring. Future competition will likely involve building military bases, strengthening navies, investing in ports, and expanding diplomatic influence. That's been the story.